Welcome to the Sacred Geometry of Consciousness. For more than 33 years, your show hosts, Gregory and Gail Hogue, have been internationally known leaders in creating sacred geometric tools for expanding loving consciousness and well-being. Listen in now as they share practical applications of sacred geometry in everyday life.
Hello and welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today as we continue to talk more about the pathways used by Spirit to connect to us. As we open to intuition and connection with guidance, it is valuable to recognize the signs and pathways used by Spirit. Everything in existence is an expression of Spirit. It is our opportunity to regain that connection and enjoy discovering the messages from Source. These techniques increase our ability to communicate on a daily basis with Higher Self. As we familiarize ourselves with these modalities, we will gain greater accuracy and clarity on the light path of spiritual evolution. There are a couple of audios that are archived, shows that we've already done, that speak to how we receive guidance through our higher sensory perceptions, things like our intuition and the way that we relate to some of this inspiration that comes in. We've talked about how Spirit uses really attractive elements to get our attention and draw us into something that's outside of the regular pathway that we're on. Getting our attention is really important. And another wonderful way that we get attentive is by having synchronicities happen in our lives. And this is such a wonderful way of seeing what shows up on our path. So if you haven't listened to those audios, go back. They're there for you. And now we're going to continue on to the next.
So as we just talked about synchronicities and those elements coming into our life, I think the more you get on the path of working with Spirit, working with higher guidance, you're going to find that the experience of receiving feedback can grow and grow and grow. Soon, everything can be seen as universe communicating with you. I remember a time when I was experiencing such a deep state of bliss, where I was just marveling at every single dust mote floating past me. It seemed to be communicating, caressing me. It seemed to be part of the universe, directing my life on that level of dust mote all the way up to the largest things in my life. And I was totally struck so deeply by this preponderance of love around me, of support around me. And it's important to realize that as these things start happening in our lives more and more, that everything in this dimension is really many steps removed from Source. And so what that means as far as the different levels of dimensionality goes, that as you get into our reality, third dimensional reality, that it's much more metaphoric and symbolic because of the distance it's moving from Source and all the different things that it takes on in the nuances and so forth. So events are not always what they may seem to be on first take. You know, it's kind of like the way we interpret dreams. We are aware, I think all of us, that in a dream state, it's really me playing all the parts. Each of us in our dreams are playing all the different roles. And so we're playing the roles according to the way we believe them should and the way they should be played. We sometimes are playing them in ways where we're trying to, higher self is trying through the dream state to come into our consciousness and wake us up to aspects that we may have missed in our daily life. And so we have that feedback, but it's taking on flavors and different views that we need to really try to decipher in order to understand what's really being said, what's really being communicated to us. Now, obviously, you can go deeper and deeper into everything around you and almost get caught up in it. Like, oh my God, analyzing every single little thing. What did she mean by that? How is that supposed to affect my life? But you have to be careful that you don't overanalyze your life. You don't get caught up in doing it so much that you take the joy out of life, you take the spontaneity out, that you miss the truth by overanalyzing everything so deeply, that you really could let your ego come in too much. You have to stay with the simplicity that's very heartful in order to catch the meaning that universe is wanting to share with you. And so, just as your ego might manipulate the simplicity of a loving message and distort it, just stay with sometimes your first take on things and then move on. If you miss what's really being shared, universe will come back. It does that. Universe is you. It's you playing with you again and again until you get it. So, one, it's important to realize that everything is universe really speaking and that we can open to that more and more and more, and that we can do it in a light and playful way, and it always needs to be heartful in the way we interpret it, in the way we accept and understand what's being offered to us, because that's really the essence of universe. We remember that it's always love that is wanting to come into our life to expand our sense of love, our sense of connection. And so that's the nature of how we connect in to everything that's being shared with us.
It's a very interesting thing when we think about how we are always being coached and supported to become more and more present, to step beyond the ego, beyond the limitations of culture and everything that we've been raised to be, and come back into, as Gregory was saying, the simplicity of who we are. Who are we at that soul level? When we are on this journey to become multidimensional beings, we want to be able to access all of the wonderful messages that universe is tossing in our direction, that we are putting in front of ourselves, so that we can be more present, more conscious, more aware, and more loving. When it gets down to it, it really is all about that, all about the love, all about each and every one of us recognizing that everything that comes our way is actually knocking on our door saying, wait a minute, I want to show you something else so that you can be more conscious, more loving, more creative. And we are inspired and creative beings. I like to use the word co-creative because as we were speaking before, we are one with universe, everything. The more that we get on this path, we recognize that the creative self is magnificent and that there is so much that we are creating every single moment. Communication is a two-way endeavor. So when we talk about receiving feedback to grow and evolve, feedback is a loop. It is receiving communication and then it is giving communication. So it is a loop, an evolutionary path. And as we step into our role as co-creators, as divine co-creators, and we access the higher levels of who we are, and we recognize that we can reach into all these realms of universe, of creation, of soul. As we do that, we also become aware that we are in the driver's seat. There is so much that we are capable of. So all of this is to support us in the process of waking up, of being present, of being more and more congruent and capable to participate in our lives in a wonderful, joyful, ecstatic, and loving, compassionate way. So all of the signs that universe drops our way are helping us, are supporting us to have a more balanced life, to have a more in-depth experience as living, creative, divine, and loving beings, to be able to grow into being more and more conscious with everything that we realize.
You know, it is so powerful, the feedback that's coming from universe. And what we're talking about now, we're talking about love and we're talking about joy. And certainly that's the end product for all of us. And yet there's a lot of muck to traipse through in this process. And sometimes some of the feedback that universe gives, I know has given me, has been really painful, has been really bringing that deep part of my being. I've got an anger that's lodged in there that would get set off when I see people being mistreated, when I see a lot of the things going on in the world, and makes me want to go over and pound those guys on the head and say, don't do that. Of course, that's still me pounding them just as badly as they're pounding me, emotionally, verbally, metaphorically. So it's important to realize that you've got to also deal with those ugly aspects that come up. I know some of my greatest teachers have been the ones who have elicited that anger from me, have really poked me inside in a way that I've been set off because I was letting those parts of me control and block the love from coming in. And so when I finally exploded again and again in some of these situations, that feedback finally helped me clear it, finally helped me recognize it and go, this is not going to move me further ahead. It's not just being a spiritual kind of guy and ignoring those parts of us that we're getting feedback from the universe that something isn't working, something doesn't feel good. Well, I had to dive into it. I think that's something that is there in front of us. So I'm bringing that up right now because, we're talking about things in such a nice way, and then you go, oh my God, what am I dealing with in my daily life? This isn't applicable. But it is. It's all applicable. It's all real. All the beautiful stuff, all the ugly stuff, it's a part of us that has been cultured in this reality, and we're working to shift it. So if you can't accept it and realize that it's part of who you are, and then you can't work on shifting it or changing it. So for me, that was a big one when I finally let go of some of my anger, because I realized again and again and again when I was coming up against it that it wasn't taking me anywhere to solve the problem. It wasn't changing anybody on the outside, and it was totally blocking me up on the inside. And just ignoring it did not let me get past it. So I just wanted to bring that up as an important thing to share.
Thank you. Thank you. And that actually takes us to the next piece that we want to talk to you about. And that is that the people in our lives bring us awesome, magnificent gifts. And they are an essential part of our spiritual path. Relationships in our lives are very, very amazing. Sometimes I wonder, where do these people show up to come into my life? It's so curious. There is a vibrational attraction that is happening. What a wonderful way that we can know that Spirit is supporting us through the vibration of our lives at a particular time. So, as our energy, our vibration, our frequency changes, we will also attract other people. Now, when Gregory was speaking before about some painful situations, and when there's anger, there's obviously a lot of pain that's associated with that. At the higher levels, though, from the perspective of our soul, of guidance, spirit, there is no judgment. We have judgment here on the third dimension. So the more that we can recognize that Spirit is working for us to get beyond that third dimensional construct where we are judging and we're feeling separation, we're feeling suffering and pain, that is part of a dimension that we are working to move beyond. That's what we also are talking about when we're speaking of incorporating our lives into the higher dimensional realities. And so whether we have reconnected with someone who we recognize is from a past life, there's something there that has attracted us that could be supportive in all kinds of ways. It could be supporting us because we need to grow beyond something that we worked with at another time in our life or at another time in one of our lives. Whatever it is, each person that comes into our life is offering us that ability to see more of what's there. Get beyond that. Utilize these relationships to take us to that next evolutionary level of awareness, of consciousness. And so we could be attracted to someone from a past life that demonstrated great love, or perhaps something that was missing for us and we want to bring that back into our lives. Or we might be attracting relationships into our lives that are actually mirroring things that are happening right now. That's the vibrational attraction that I was just speaking of. All of this is to benefit us from the perspective of soul evolution. So, what's the importance of seeing it that way? For me, when I see it that way, I don't take things quite so personally. I recognize that there is a higher understanding. There's something there, very supportive and loving, that wants to help me get beyond it. And so if I feel frustrated or angry or hurt because of something that goes on relationship-wise, then I know there's something there that my being wants to evolve. My consciousness is saying, hey, you're ready. You're ready to take the next step. Now, what's also wonderful is as we do take those next steps, we make new choices, we recognize new things, we really do listen up, then there are certain people that may drop away from old relationships. They've served their purpose. And there was a woman number of years ago when I first moved to Boulder from the East Coast, and there was a woman that she and I were really good friends. However, I recognized that she was somebody that was really very needy, and she always wanted me to go through her dramas with her. Well, what I recognized was that I used to like that. I used to think that I could really help people through their dramas, and I had been doing that for years. As I became aware of that, what happened was that kind of relationship got less and less attractive to me. It wasn't interesting anymore. I realized that I didn't want to keep playing that same scenario out. So what happened for me was that I spoke to her about that, and I said, this really isn't working. But she was still in that same place. She had a need for someone to be in that kind of a codependent relationship, to be there through all of those different dramatic escapades. But I didn't want to be that person anymore. Now, I'll admit it was a little difficult, and I felt a little guilty because I was still coming from that old paradigm. However, it felt so liberating to be able to recognize what was going on, speak the truth, and in a loving way say, I really want to be your friend in another way. And if that isn't cultivated by her as well as me, then what happens is those kinds of relationships start to fall away. And that's precisely what happened. We just stopped having as many times together. And so that's okay, because some of the emotional entanglements that we have gotten used to that felt comfortable to us are really limiting our growth and our ability to live purposefully and take that next step into living from our self-worth, living from a more loving and compassionate center. So during those times, if you find that you've gone through something like that, or that you are going through something where you recognize that these relationships just aren't working the way they used to be gentle. Recognize that there's a lot going on, and it's not only you that's going through a change, but it's the other person too. You can both benefit from this when you steer away from those old judgments, when you recognize that it's time to move on and live your life and your relationships from a higher dynamic. It's a wonderful opportunity, and everyone, when we look at it from that perspective, is playing a really important role in each other's lives. And by being compassionate and honest and seeing these situations in the light of what it really is, instead of being entangled in just the emotional, relational qualities, then each and every person can benefit. And then we're really operating from what is best for all, rather than just going on with the same old, same old.
Oh, that brought up something for me, and I know we only have a little bit of time left, so I'm going to share I know something in my past where I've interacted with people and they have judged me in a certain way, and just as I obviously judge other people and pull myself toward them or pull myself away from them with those judgments. And we have to be so careful on ourselves, and I'm speaking to myself right now, in forgiving myself for thinking that, oh, they thought I did this and I really didn't. But the point is, universe is moving us in the way that we need to be moved. I know I had to move away from them in order to move forward in the path that I've chosen to take in my life. So it's just so important to be gentle with yourself. And so we'll cover a little more of this next time before we go on to the sixth element. So thank you very much for joining us today.
And tune in to the next episode.
Blessings.
Blessings and love.